I came home early. From my girls' trip to surprise my husband and overheard him on the phone. Marriage is a complete nightmare, bro. I wake up every day regretting my decision. If it wasn't for her family's money, I'd be gone already. We had just celebrated our 3-year anniversary. I quietly left and returned at my normal time, greeting him with a kiss. 5 days later, he called me 27 times in 1 hour, because he understood what I did. The Napa Valley trip was everything I hoped for. The vineyards were stunning, the wine exquisite, and the company, as always, was delightful. However, on the last day, I felt an inexplicable urge to return home early. Maybe it was the longing to see Mark, or perhaps an intuition I couldn't quite place. I told Sarah and Lisa I was heading back, and they, understanding my sudden change of heart, wished me well. As I approached our home, the street was unusually quiet. The lights were on, casting a soft glow through the windows, and I could hear the faint murmur of voices. My heart fluttered with the excitement of surprising Mark, but as I got closer, a chill ran down my spine. Something felt off. I paused at the doorway. My breath caught in my throat. Mark was on the phone, his voice low and intense, speaking words that would shatter the fairy tale I thought we were living. "No, we can't meet tonight. She's coming back early." Who was he talking to? And why did his tone send a shiver of dread through me? I stepped back, my mind reeling. The man I loved, the life we had built, was it all just an illusion? I've always been the kind of person who sees the world through rose-tinted glasses, believing in the fairy tale of love. My name is Emily, and my story with Mark began at a friend's wedding, where the air was thick with the scent of roses and the promise of new beginnings. Our eyes met across the dance floor, and in that moment I felt like I had found my forever. We were the couple everyone envies, the ones who seemed to have it all figured out. Our life together was a tapestry of shared dreams, laughter, and the occasional squabble, but nothing that ever felt like it could tear us apart. Just last month, we celebrated our 3-year anniversary with a grand party. Friends and family raised their glasses to our enduring love, their cheers echoing the sentiment that we were unbreakable. To celebrate this milestone, I planned a getaway, a girls' trip to Napa Valley with my closest friends, Sarah and Lisa. It was supposed to be a weekend of indulgence where we'd sip on the finest wines, bask in the sun, and share stories that only the closest of friends can. I left Mark at home, thinking he'd enjoy some time with his buddies, perhaps a poker night, or a barbecue. But here's where the fairy tale begins to unravel. I decided to surprise him by coming home a day early. The drive back was filled with anticipation, my heart light with the joy of seeing him sooner than expected. I imagined his surprise, the warmth of his embrace, and the sweet nothings we'd whisper to each other. As I approached our home, the street was unusually quiet. The lights were on, casting a soft glow through the windows. The Napa Valley trip was everything I hoped for. The vineyards were stunning, the wine exquisite, and the company, as always, was delightful. However, on the last day, I felt an inexplicable urge to return home early. Maybe it was the longing to see Mark, or perhaps an intuition I couldn't quite place. I told Sarah and Lisa I was heading back, and they, understanding my sudden change of heart, wished me well. Arriving home, I expected to find Mark lounging on the couch, maybe watching a game or reading. Instead, the house was eerily silent. I tiptoed through the living room, my heart fluttering with the excitement of surprising him. But as I neared the kitchen, I heard Mark's voice, low and intense, speaking on the phone. His tone was unlike anything I'd heard before. It was laced with urgency and a hint of something else I couldn't quite decipher. My steps slowed, my heart now pounding for a different reason. I paused at the doorway, my breath caught in my throat. Mark was saying, "No, we can't meet tonight. She's coming back early." My mind raced, trying to piece together who she might be. The silence that followed his words was deafening, filled only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then his voice softened, almost pleading. "I'll figure something out. Just give me some time." The implications of his words hit me like a wave. My fairy tale was crumbling before my eyes, the edges fraying with each hushed word. I felt a chill, not from the air conditioning, but from the cold realization that something was very wrong. I stepped back, my mind reeling. Over the next few days, I wrestled with my emotions, unsure of what to do next. Each morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, the weight of Mark's words pressing down on me like a physical burden. I found myself replaying the conversation in my head, dissecting every word, every tone, trying to find a shred of the man I thought I knew. I kept up appearances, smiling through dinners, laughing at his jokes, but inside, I was a storm of confusion and hurt. I watched him, looking for signs of deceit or regret, but Mark seemed oblivious to the turmoil he'd caused. He was the same loving, attentive husband, or so he appeared. At work, I was distracted, my thoughts constantly drifting back to that overheard conversation. My colleagues noticed my preoccupation, but I brushed off their concerns with a forced cheerfulness. Just tired from the trip, I'd say, avoiding their probing eyes. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Mark's arm around me, I felt the urge to confront him, to demand answers. But fear held me back. Fear of what I might hear. Fear of losing the life we'd built together. Instead, I leaned into him, seeking comfort in his warmth, even as my mind screamed at me to pull away. I started to notice small things I'd overlooked before. The late nights at work, the secretive phone calls he'd take in another room, the way he'd sometimes look at me with a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Each observation was like another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to complete. Confided in Sarah during one of our late-night calls. "What if he's having an affair?" I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, suggested I gather evidence before jumping to conclusions. "You need to know for sure, Em," she said, her voice firm yet gentle. So, I began to keep a closer watch, not out of desire but out of necessity. I checked his phone when he was in the shower, looked through his emails, and even followed him once when he said he was working late. Each action felt like the days following my return were a blur. I went through the motions of our daily life, but inside, I was a mess. Mark seemed oblivious to the change in me, or perhaps he was too wrapped up in his own world to notice. I started to observe him more closely, looking for signs of the man who had spoken so bitterly about our marriage. One evening, while he was out with friends, I found myself going through his phone. It was an invasion of privacy, but I needed to understand. There were no incriminating messages or calls, just the usual banter with friends. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing. Then, 5 days after my return, my phone began to ring incessantly. It was Sarah, her voice urgent. "Emily, you need to come over right now. It's important." I felt a surge of panic. Was this about Mark? Had she found out something I hadn't? My hands shook as I drove to her place, each mile stretching out like an eternity. When I arrived, Sarah was waiting at the door, her expression grave. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone," she began, leading me inside. "I saw Mark last night at a bar downtown. He wasn't alone." My heart sank. "Who was he with?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "It was a woman, Emily. They were close," Sarah said, her words careful, her eyes avoiding mine. I couldn't see her face clearly, but the way they were together, it wasn't just friendly. The room spun around me. The implications were clear, yet I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. "Did they—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah shook her head. I left before it could go any further, but it was enough to know something isn't right. I sat there, numb, as Sarah tried to comfort me with her presence. The warmth of her hand on mine did little to thaw the icy dread that had settled in my chest. The drive back home was a fog. I replayed Sarah's words. The image of Mark with Mark called me 27 times in 1 hour. Each call went unanswered as I sat in our bedroom, staring at the phone, my heart racing. Finally, I picked up. His voice was frantic. "Emily, please, we need to talk. I know you heard me that day. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. It was a moment of weakness, a stupid rant to my brother." The confession was out. He knew I had overheard him. The silence on my end was deafening. Mark continued, "I love you, Emily. I was just venting. Please, let's talk about this." I hung up. the decision now mine to make. The weight of his words, the image of him with another woman, it all swirled in my mind like a storm. I felt betrayed, yet part of me yearned for the love we once shared, the fairy tale we had lived. I walked to the window, looking out at the street where we used to walk hand in hand. The streetlights cast long shadows, much like the doubts that now stretched across my heart. The phone rang again. It was Mark, his persistence like a relentless drumbeat. I let it go to voicemail, his voice filling the room. "Emily, I know I've messed up, but I need you to understand it was a mistake. I was caught up in the moment, but my heart belongs to you." His words should have soothed me, but they only stoked the fire of my confusion. Was it just a mistake, or was it the beginning of the end? I replayed our life together, the laughter, the love, the promises whispered under the stars. I sat back on the bed, the phone still in my hand, feeling its weight like a stone. Mark's voice echoed in my mind. "I love you, Emily." But love, I realized, was not just about the words spoken in the light of day. It was also about the secrets whispered in the dark. I needed clarity, not just for myself, but for the life we had built together. With a heavy heart, I dialed Sarah. Her voice was a balm. "Emily, whatever." The next day, we sat down in our living room, the air thick with tension. Mark's eyes were heavy, his posture slumped as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. He began to speak, his voice cracking with emotion. "Emily, I need to tell you something. I've been feeling so inadequate, so trapped by expectations, both mine and everyone else's. My career, it's not where I thought it would be. I feel like I'm failing, not just myself, but you too." Tears streamed down my face, not just for the pain his words caused, but for the realization of how little I knew about his inner turmoil. He continued, "I said those things out of frustration, out of my own insecurities. It wasn't about our relationship, it was about me, my own battles. We talked for hours, delving into our fears, our dreams, and what we truly wanted from our marriage." Mark's honesty, though painful, was like a key turning in a lock, opening a door to a deeper understanding. He spoke of his dreams that had been sidelined, his fears of not measuring up, and how he felt he had let me down by not being the man he thought I deserved. I shared my own fears, the pressure I felt to keep our fairy tale alive, the fear of losing what we had built. We both realized that our love, while strong, had been tested by the silence of our unshared burdens. In the end, we decided to seek counseling. It wasn't an easy path, but it was one we chose together. Mark's honesty, though it had hurt, had opened a door to a deeper commitment. Our marriage, once seemingly perfect, now had the chance to become genuinely strong. We agreed to start with a therapist recommended by Sarah, someone who specialized in couples facing significant life changes. The first session was scheduled for the following week, a step towards healing, towards understanding each other beyond the surface. As we sat there, the room filled with the soft light of the morning, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Mark reached for my hand, his touch gentle, seeking forgiveness. "I love you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story."